one frequency, but also produce a spectrum consisting of several overtones. This is variously referred to as timbre or tone color. This constitutes the quality of that sound. Just to explain this concept some more, let's say you try to produce a single frequency with your voice. One way to produce a single frequency is to get a keyboard and keep pressing one of its keys and you hum along till you resonate. If you actually analyze the waveform you produced, you will see not only a significant amount of the frequency you were trying to produce, but also small amounts of other frequencies, which are the overtones. The exact composition of overtones you produced is in some sense the signature of your voice and constitutes its quality. This should also set you thinking. Just how in the world do you perceive sounds? How do you identify your friend's voice? Clearly you're not decomposing it into frequency components like what the electrical engineers call Fourier analysis. How do you sometimes make out which song it is simply by listening to a few notes? How is it that you can mentally visualize someone's voice, laughter, sounds, some past conversations, songs, etc.? Basically, when you hear sounds and music, you're simply doing a pattern recognition against what you already know. Over the years, your brain has stored a certain number of primitives. This list is a dynamic one, and primitives are added or lost as you grow older, and you have an intrinsic capability to match a freshly heard sound impulse to the basic database. If you hear a strange sound that does not produce a match, sometimes you load it up as a primitive. An equally interesting exercise is this. Think of 5 songs you really like. Can you explain why you like them, or what is in common with all of them? Can you explain and define your musical taste? Unfortunately, however, much analysis one does in terms of frequencies and so forth, it finally boils down to psychological factors when it comes to music and taste. Analysis is merely a tool to understand some of its structure. It can never explain why some musical sounds are deemed romantic or some are deemed harsh, or why some ragam is an evening ragam, if you believe in such things. Such mystique about music will come back to haunt us and will forever prevent us from understanding its totality in an objective manner. This is a simple stab at the psychology of sound perception. Let's get back to the business at hand. Western music, Indian music, and the keyboard. Let us examine the frequency aspect of music first. This is perhaps the most studied aspect as well. We mentioned that all music is produced in the audible frequency range, a range which varies from person to person. Although human ears cannot tell very high tones, musical instruments can produce frequencies, overtones, even beyond the threshold of human hearing. Music is sometimes described technically as, quote, tonal or chromatic. Both terms simply mean that we use a whole spectrum of frequencies to produce music. The audible range is divided into octaves. An octave is really a frequency range from a frequency f1 to f2, such that f2, the second frequency, is twice that of f1 in terms of cycles or hertz, the unit of measurement. For some physiological reason, the human ear is logarithmic and is sensitive to frequency octaves. The audible frequency is then comprised of many octaves. We can choose any number to be our f1, and of course f2 is twice or 2 times f1. We can define an octave from 10 Hz to 20 Hz, or equally define one from 15 Hz to 30 Hz. Let's get a sense of what an octave is. This playing of an octave is done by Harihar.
This is an illustration of the notes in the keyboard, starting with middle C. This is middle C. The next note is a black note to the right of C. It's called C sharp in the Western notation system.
And Re or Sadharana Rishabham in the Carnatic music.
The next one is a white key. It's called D. The next key is D sharp. sharp. Next one is E. Next key is F. One thing to note here is that there is no difference between E and F.
Good.
I said no difference between.
Oh, okay. That's fine. This piece will illustrate the middle C octave in the Western music scale, and will also compare it with the Dvadasha Swarasthanas, or the 12 Swara Sthanas, or the places of the 12 notes in the Carnatic music scale. And we will also illustrate the Shodasa, or 16 Swarasthanas, where there are 4 extra notes which are just varieties of existing notes, which are just given a different name. So the thing which is going on in the background is the Sa Pa Sa in the C or middle C scale. Now we will start with Harihar illustrating the middle C scale and giving the note and its description as in the Western music, followed by the same thing in the Carnatic music.
The first note is C, middle C. The next one is a black note to the right of C, and it's called C sharp, or alternately it can be called D flat. The next note is D. The next note to the right of D can be called D sharp or E flat. Then comes E. The next note is F. To the right of F comes F sharp or G flat. Next comes G. G sharp, A sharp or B flat, B, and C. So when we reach the higher C, we have come to the end of an octave, and the frequency of the higher C is double the frequency of the lower C we played initially. So Sa, Sa.
So that was an illustration of the ideas of an octave, and especially with the illustration of the C scale or the middle C scale. So as we went from the lower Sa, which was the frequency F1, to the higher Sa, the frequency F2, there was a doubling of the frequency. In terms of sound production, a typical human voice can produce several frequencies, although it is usually limited to about 3 or 4 octaves. Even if you have a drum-like, groggy morning voice at the low end of the range and a shrill, ear-piercing shriek at the high end, only the exceptionally gifted people can produce a wide range of vocal sounds spanning several octaves. Of course, there are those female Indian movie playback singers who can produce ultra-high frequencies which only dogs can hear clearly. By the way, we are only talking about primary frequencies and not overtones associated with the quality of our voices. Remember that overtones are higher frequency components but produced in much lower intensities. A piano or a keyboard is a typical Western musical instrument. All we see is a bunch of keys, some in black and some in white. However, upon a closer look, we see that there is a periodicity as we go from the left of the keyboard to the right, and here I'm assuming you know how to sit in front of the keyboard. The keys produce higher and higher frequencies. In fact, the key frequencies are arranged in such a manner that they are in a geometric series. That is, the frequency between any key and the key immediately to the left, irrespective of the color of the key, is a constant. The constant being equal to the 12th root or 2 or 1.059. For example, typically there's a white key in the keyboard set to 240 Hz, and then the adjacent key to the right, black one as a matter of fact, is set to 240 multiplied by 1.059 or 254 Hz. By the specific choice of this ratio, 12th root of 2, we find that by the time we have reached the 13th key, we have doubled our frequency and thus spanned a whole octave. In fact, if you look at the keyboard, you see that the key pattern repeats every 12 keys. If you choose the white key at 240 Hz and the 13th key to be 480 Hz and your octave range from 240 to 480 Hz. Equally well, you could have started counting from the black key at 254 Hz and 12 keys later you would have hit a note that spanned an octave, except that this time your octave ranged from 254 to 508 Hz. This division of the octave into 12 tones, which have a specific ratio between the adjacent keys, the ratio equaling 1.059, is peculiar to Western music. This geometric arrangement of frequencies of the keys in an octave is called an equally tempered arrangement, and besides the keyboard, most Western musical instruments are also tuned to such an arrangement. Even though there is a degree of freedom about what you want to be at the range of the octave, whether it's from 240 to 480 or 254 to 508, the Western music